I'll get started.
We are recording now and everyone has been admitted.
Okay, I still see some people connecting. Does that mean they're is that them or is that us?
It's just based on our plans. We talk about everything.
There's a link
No.
connecting.
Look in the face right now. Like, you're
All right, so Elijah, we're getting a lot of feedback. Is everybody else muted right now? Or?
No, they should be. I'm gonna go through. I'll go through and mute them.
Okay, Mr. Ramos, you ready to roll?
Yes.
All right, so welcome everyone. I'll open the planning board meeting for Wednesday, September 16th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. I'm just going to read a notice that pursuant to the governor's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order suspending strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. The meeting of the Town of Bridgewater Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time. This meeting is being recorded, and within 48 hours, we will post a link of the recording on the town's website and/or town's social media page. The following members of the planning board are participating remotely. Patrick Driscoll, that's me, I'm the chair. Raymond DeJamian, the vice chair. Jean Garino, the clerk. Michael McDonald, and Stephen Geller. During this meeting, all votes of the board will be taken as roll call vote. The following Bridgewater town staff will also be participating remotely. Jennifer Burke, who is our Community Economic Development Director. Mr. Elijah Romulus, the Assistant Town Planner. Azu Antonero is not joining us this evening. And Leslie Dorr, the Office Administrator. At this time, everyone's mic is muted. The board's mic will be unmuted through the whole meeting. And as the items appear on the agenda, the project's representatives' mics will be unmuted. If the project is a public hearing that allows for public comment, we ask that you use the chat feature to ask your question by listing your name and address in your question. The chair will recognize all the questions in order. You can also use the raise my hand feature in the participant menu, and you'll be unmuted when the chair recognizes you. Again, please state your name and address before asking a question. If you're on the phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. So, first item on the agenda tonight, we have number 60 through 88 Broad Street. This is an application by West Point Realty. It's a special permit and a site plan for the construction project includes 4 mixed-use buildings with commercial space on the first floor and residential on the upper floors, as well as a separate parking lot to service the buildings. This contains maps 21, lots 95 through 98, and lot 202 and 205. Mr. Ramos, I have the public hearing notice. Do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
Yes, I can read it.
Great.
So the Bridgewater Planning Board will be conducting a public hearing on September 16th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. on application by West Point Realty for site plan approval under section 9.8 of the town's zoning ordinance and a special permit under section 19 for a proposed mixed-use project located on Broad Street. Map 21, parcels 95 to 98 and 202 to 205. The proposed project includes 4 mixed-use buildings with commercial space on the first floor and residential units on the upper floors, as well as a separate parking lot to service the buildings. Copies of the plans may be requested by emailing cd@bridgewaterma.org. The public hearing will be held as a virtual meeting over Zoom, and all interested parties are encouraged to attend.
Okay, so, and just so everybody knows how we're going to conduct the meeting, what we're going to first do is have the applicant make their presentation. We have some preliminary comments from the town engineer that we're going to read into the record after that. We're then going to ask the town manager or the town community economic development director to speak on the developers agreement that was established for this project and try to get some feedback on that. Then we'll ask the board to ask questions to the applicant or the town staff, and then we'll open it up for public comment. The way we'll handle public comment is that letters from the public will be read in for the record. We received 4 or 5 of those in the last couple of days. And then we'll open it up to the public to ask questions, state comments or concerns. And when we do that, we just ask that you state your name and address for the record. And you can ask either through the chat feature as we described or raise your hand. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the applicant's representatives. And if Mr. Romulus will work with them to unmute them so they can make their presentation and share the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Troy Clarkson. I'm the principal of Clarkson Consulting. I represent the developer and have for some time West Point Realty. As many of you may know, I know there's many people here on this call, has made an investment in the town of Bridgewater far beyond this proposed project. West Point's principal, Jim Pascal, is here on the call tonight and is available at any time to answer questions or to provide thoughts. I thought before getting into this specific project, I'd just provide a little background on the investments that Jim's made in the community. He has for many years, better part of a decade now, made investments in the community, taken properties that were previously blighted or problems for the police and fire department, and improved them to a level that they are a credit to the community now. I'm sure many or all of you have driven by probably his most prominent project, and that is the house behind the Academy building on South Street that Jim painstakingly restored. And that's just really, I think, the most prominent example of the care and quality that he puts into projects. So this project that we're discussing tonight is what I would submit a landmark project for the town of Bridgewater. It has the opportunity not only to revitalize, but to transform the central business district. I'm sure members of the planning board will remember back in 2018, some 2 years ago, when the town council actually amended the zoning ordinance and created the opportunity for a project like this. Jim and I were both before the town council and participated in that process when the ordinance was amended. And based on our involvement, I would submit to you that this project that's before you tonight is precisely the kind of project that was envisioned when this ordinance was adjusted. And we come to you tonight, I think, having collaborated and worked very closely with the town over these last 2 years. I'd like to give thanks and credit to Town Manager Michael Dutton and to Director of Planning and Economic Development, Jennifer Burke. Those two representatives of the community and Jim and myself and Jim's technical team have really worked together to bring this project to you. It represents four mixed-use buildings on approximately 2.87 acres. I'm going to reiterate a couple of thoughts that I shared actually a couple of years ago with the town council when this project was an idea, but those same themes still hold true. This project, as it's proposed, actually fulfills goal number 2 of Bridgewater's own housing production plan that talked about leveraging existing resources to create additional housing. The town also commissioned a study from Howard Stein and Hudson on the Central Square assessment, and it talked about improving pedestrian safety, creating a safe, comfortable, and accessible environment for pedestrians and walkability, livability, and economic vitality. This project fulfills all of those goals. We've participated, and you'll see in the developers agreement, participated in discussions that will enhance the streetscape and pedestrian access as part of this project. The South Shore Chamber housing plan itself talked about more housing with smaller footprints built near walkable, vibrant neighborhoods or near transit. Again, this project fulfills all of those because not only does it, again, create that sense of walkability, but its proximity to the nearby commuter rail station on the campus just fulfills another important goal and really is consistent not only with the plans here, the housing production plan and the South Shore Chambers plan in Bridgewater, but with development and housing trends that are occurring nationwide. Back when we proposed this change to the zoning ordinance, I also noted that this project will have a very significant and very positive financial impact on the town. We estimate that it will bring in at least $400,000 a year in new taxes to the community, which is another important factor. Along with me tonight and the developer, Mr. Pascal, we have our technical experts, Larry Silva from Silva Engineering and Tim Johnson, who's the architect on the team. They will be available to answer any specific questions you have or walk you through any of the technical aspects of this project. I would like, before I turn it over to our technical team or answer any preliminary questions you have, is to note that in my memo to the planning board on this project, I'll just highlight a couple of the points that we raised. This proposal complies with the provisions of the zoning ordinance and of the changes that the town council made. It demonstrates that the impacts of the development will be of benefit to the town. It demonstrates that traffic and roadways will be at acceptable level of service, and we of course submitted a detailed traffic study done by professionals. It provides for adequate convenience and safety of citizens and vehicles. And in fact, it enhances pedestrian safety, as I noted, through the streetscape and traffic calming measures. It provides for adequate disposal of sewage, refuse, and other wastes, and provides for adequate drainage. Those are components of the ordinance that I highlighted in the memo, demonstrating the painstaking progress that's occurred. During our negotiations on the developers agreement, and that was over the course of many months, we also talked about density bonuses. And as you may know, in this section of the zoning ordinance, in section 1904, there are several sections that allow for additional density bonuses based on the performance of the developer. So we can walk through those, Mr. Chairman, at some time during this hearing, but I just would note that within that developers agreement, there are several commitments that the developer made for further investment in the community. Just one example of fixing the Veterans Memorial Monument that's on the town green, making those streetscape improvements that I talked about. So there are additional investments that the developer is prepared to make in addition to multi-million-dollar investment in the project, not only to achieve some of the density bonuses, but to further enhance the community. So we believe that, that again, as I mentioned at the outset, that this project fulfills the vision that was set forth by the town council back in 2018 when they amended the zoning ordinance, and gives this community an opportunity to revitalize the central business district and create a place where people can live and shop and even recreate. And that, I think, is the opportunity to create the vibrant downtown that this town has sought to have for many, many years. Those are really just my introductory comments. I really would like to leave time for members of the planning board and the public to ask any specific questions on the project. Again, the developer, Mr. Pascal, is here on the call, and I'm sure would be happy to reintroduce himself to you, and all of us are happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Sorry, can we ask questions?
I can't see who's asking, I'm sorry.
Sorry, my name is Jeff Daniels. I'm a local resident.
So what we're trying to do is we're going to try to have the whole presentation, and then we'll open up the public and board comment after.
Okay, great.
So, Mr. Clarkson, would you like to turn it over to Mr. Silver or the architect or your technical team at this point?
Certainly defer to your wishes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, most certainly they're prepared to make a detailed presentation on the specifics of the project. And I assume that Mr. Pascal would want to just say a quick hello and reintroduce himself to members of the planning board as well.
Sure.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Good evening. Jim Pascal, principal of West Point Realty. I want to thank you all for your time tonight and your consideration as we try to navigate this very lengthy process that we're trying to, I think, see through a very prominent piece of Broad Street and try to come up with something that we believe will be well received within the town and will be, I think, to what Troy mentioned a couple of years ago, will be the economic engine that can help revitalize that whole community. And we're excited to do that. There's been a lot of great feedback, and I know there are some concerns from some of the neighbors and residents, and we're happy to take those and try to hear them and understand them and do what we can to try to work through them. So with that said, I'd like to open it up to Tim Johnson, who can talk about architecture and some of the plannings of these particular buildings.
Thank you, Jim. Tim Johnson, project architect. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Great. I'll just give a quick overview of the project, and if there are any specific questions, I can certainly answer those. As Mr. Clarkson mentioned, we are proposing 4 separate buildings. These are all 4-story buildings, type 5A construction, which is all wood construction. The buildings will be sprinkled. Each building, as I mentioned, is 4 stories. 3 of the buildings will have elevators, which will service all floors, which make all units handicap adaptable. The first floor of each 4 buildings is a commercial space. We have a floor-to-floor for the first to second of 13 feet, which gives us approximately 11.5 foot clear in the commercial space, which allows the required glazing for the commercial spaces that face the street. Also, we have provided sign banding for any commercial signage going up. The exterior materials in all the buildings will be non-wood, fiber cement materials. Typically, they have a 50-year warranty. If we do use a fiber cement material that needs painting, we would use an exterior acrylic latex, which is a very hardy paint. Of course, the buildings will be designed to the stretch energy code, which is 20% more energy efficient than current code. We also have plenty of roof space for future solar panels. As you know, the electrical grid is getting greener by the year as we dump in more solar, hydro, and wind into the energy grid. We have parking. The parking for each project, Mr. Clarkson has provided you with that information on the number of parking spaces. Suffice it to say, we have parking in the rear. There's no parking in the front of the building. In the rear also, we provide a dumpster and recycling receptacles at the rear of the properties. In the building, we also will be providing bike parking. We try to do one bike per unit. So we offer alternate modes of transportation. We can also offer a ride-share car in each parking area. I mentioned trash and recycling. So that's the basic overview of the 4 buildings. Jim and I and Troy, we went around the neighborhood and we saw the the architectural styles present in the neighborhood, which is a lot like the older communities around the 128 belt. The Romantic style, the colonial revival, classical revival, Greek revival. So we picked from those well-known styles in the neighborhood and built on those styles for each building. We're still fine-tuning them, but we're using classical proportions like 2-to-1 ratio in the windows. Also, classical proportions for the massings or the front elevations of the buildings. So that is a very quick overview of the architecture. I could hand it off to Mr. De Silva if he wants to speak a little bit about the civil engineering aspect of the project.
Mr. Silver isn't going to be with us tonight. He's actually in West Bridgewater. This is Rebecca from Silver Engineering, also an engineer dealing with the drainage and the design on this project. So the 4 buildings we have are going to be considered redevelopment from a stormwater standard. There was impervious there. We are going to do everything we can to treat and improve the situation from where it was before. Of the 4 buildings, actually all 4 of them, never mind, there are going to be underground infiltration chambers on all 4 of them. The one closest to the center of town will actually share land on 70 Broad Street to have some infiltration under the ground. Mr. Silver has done test pits and they were witnessed by the town engineer. So we are going to address some of the concerns that they found while performing the test pits and determining groundwater. Each of the 4 buildings will have their own water for domestic and their own water for fire. There will be a transformer situated in between the 2 buildings to serve the electric needs. Gas will also be provided, and sewer will have connections into the street as well. Stormwater management would be contained on site with an overflow of the larger storm events to Broad Street, either direct connect on one of them and or overflow on the other 3. I could keep going, but I'd like to hear if the board members have any questions.
So, Ms. Baptista, are you gonna, so did you see the, where you guys sent the memo that the planning department put together regarding the site plan?
Yes, I have seen the memo. That long, I forgot, it was really long, right? A couple pages?
Are you gonna address the site plan as well, or just the drainage?
I was just going to talk to the drainage. What would you like me to discuss on that memorandum there? Let me find it. I'm sorry. I don't have it in front of me. That was the one Jennifer sent out, correct? This one? Yes, the special permit and site plan review.
Yes.
So I know there was concerns about the parking lot. I didn't get too much into it with Larry. I know Azu made a comment about drainage, but this was an approved parking lot that just fell in disarray. So we wish the planning board just to let us reestablish the parking lot with the existing drainage that was there. That was the one for the Broad Street on the east side.
Mhm.
Let's see, what was the other concern Azu had on that? Oh, the land surveyor, we had that originally stamped by a land surveyor. Let's see, what were the other comments we had? Oh, parking? Yeah, the parking that's the big one, right?
Well, there's a number of items like
Yeah,
about, buffering and 10% vegetation and 20% open space, and all those calculations being updated and shown.
yep, we will have to update the site plans to show that. I'll have to talk with Pascal on a landscape and what he would wish to do with the design of that. I know there was concerns about possible wetlands in the rear. We're looking into that now. If that does develop into something, we would obviously file appropriately. So that side of things is not quite ready. But yes, we will address those comments about landscaping and screening. I'm still reading all these lovely comments. Signs. Okay, I'll have to talk to Mr. Pascal about if he has any signs for these commercial units, if it's just on the building, although I believe the architect may have mentioned something. Was there any other comments? We'll have to go through and issue an actual response letter to all of these comments. And Jonas would need a water impact report. So we will get in touch and coordinate with Mr. Pascal and submit that.
Rebecca, we didn't see a lighting plan or snow storage and maintenance plan. Do you know if those were just not provided, or are you?
I will again have to discuss with Pascal. Lighting, we can submit one. Snow storage, well, that'll be interesting. We will submit something on that. That's for sure. We will have to designate an area. The parking lot across the street may satisfy that. Do the board have any other comments other than the ones listed here?
So is that, is that, I don't want to cut you off. Are you just addressing, are you just addressing the drainage at this point?
At this point, that's all I was discussing. Any of these other comments, we'll have to regroup and provide you an appropriate response letter.
And there's been no site plan provided that meets our requirements currently for the 2 parcels on the east side?
No, we submitted the approved parking lot design from 1993. It was signed by the planning board. It was constructed. It's just fell in disarray. The catch basins and the underground infrastructure is still there. It just needs to be repaved, cleaned up, restriped.
Do we have any feedback from staff on that, Ms. Burke, from Mr. Antonero or from yourself?
I don't believe the town engineer has responded, and I was not clear that that was the intent, so I don't have a comment at this time.
Okay. Because this is an entirely new project, so. All right. Is there anything more to the presentation this evening from Silver Engineering, Ms. Batista?
Not from my part. We have a few more things to iron out to answer some of these concerns.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I might, just to follow up on the presentation from Ms. Baptista. So we did receive the detailed comments from the planning board, and obviously they were numerous, but we've had discussions as recently as this afternoon with the staff on those. And so we are in the process of providing a detailed response. We're happy to tick through them in this memo for the benefit of the board and the public if you'd like, but they are generally fairly routine comments that we believe we can respond to, as Rebecca mentioned, in a detailed response letter that the planning board can then review and consider.
So I just, Ms. Baptista, I'm looking at an old comment from planning with the prior submission.
Okay.
So when we looked at this prior, it was an architectural site plan. It looks like it's the same site plan currently. And a number of parking spaces and the dimensions and things didn't comply, and there were different dimensions. Were those adjusted on this plan, or is this the same plan just on? Has this plan been adjusted at all, site-wise and circulation-wise?
This is the same parking layout that was presented to us as Silver Engineering. The architect laid it out. Our goal was just to get through the drainage process of things, and so we'll have to coordinate again with the architect and with Mr. Pascal. If we have to provide screening, I can already tell you some of these parking spots will have to be moved, accounted for somewhere else. we have a little bit more to do.
And so some of the dead ends behind the buildings where there's no turning
Yes.
lanes and things like that will be addressed.
Correct.
Okay. So, Mr. Clarkson, do you want to walk through the letter? Ms. Burke, do you want to walk through the letter with the board? Do you want to get board comments at this time, Ms. Burke? What?
On your, you had indicated you wanted the town manager to speak about the developers agreement. Did you want to do that at this time?
Sure. I didn't know if we wanted to give Mr. Clarkson the opportunity to walk through this draft site plan review that you had provided, or if we want to jump into Mr. Dutton's presentation.
I'll leave that up to the applicant.
Mr. Clarkson, would you like to address some of these things? Or would you just like to work it out with the engineer and resubmit them, or what would you prefer, sir?
So as I mentioned, we're working on the response. Obviously, they're very detailed. The memo from the town is dated September 11th, and so we're just getting into the meat of responding to them. So I would suggest that it would probably be more productive for the planning board for us to put together, as Rebecca suggested, a detailed response letter. But we're more than happy to delve into detail tonight if the planning board wishes. But certainly, we also feel as though the input of the town manager into the process of the developers agreement is critically important, because that was a process that took some time, and as I mentioned before, was really a very positive and collaborative process.
Okay, and have you seen were Mr. Antonero's comments forwarded to you as well, the town engineers?
Yes, yes.
And I don't have those in front of me, but did he also indicate, Ms. Burke, that I don't have those in front of me, but were the test pits, and was he requiring test pits and upgraded drainage across the street?
I don't.
No.
It didn't say it's required. He just noted that no soil evaluation test pits for groundwater or
Okay.
management design system have been documented.
All right, so he may or may not want them, but the applicant should touch base with him to see what he wants. That's all.
Yeah, in fairness, he received that plan on Monday, so I'm not sure that he had a lot of time to look at it.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Clarkson, would you like to turn it over to Mr. Dutton?
That would be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I don't really have a presentation. I just want to give the planning board a little bit of an update on the developers agreement and the sort of the nature of it and why it's here. And it's obviously the first one that you've seen. It's the first time that we've done a developers agreement under section 1904, which changed, I believe, back in 2018. So this is sort of the first case, as you will. So the zoning provision calls for density bonuses in return for a variety of different items that can be negotiated through a developer's agreement. We used this opportunity, and I think, as Mr. Clarkson mentioned, we've had discussions for really ever since the council passed the amended zoning. We've had discussions and we've had negotiations to hash out a developer's agreement. I think the one that we've done is a good model, should serve as sort of a template for what we do in the future. But I think this first pass is certainly one that's of benefit to the town. So I don't know if you want me to walk through it. Certainly you've had it in front of you. We revised it slightly in the past couple of weeks, but it's the basics are all the same that you've seen before. So I'm certainly happy to walk through it, or you're certainly welcome to ask questions about it. I'll defer to the chair on how you want me to do that.
Have all the board members printed it off and reviewed it. Would you like, I think it might be helpful if Mr. Dutton walks through it, especially since it's our first experience with this.
Sure, I can do that. So the agreement essentially recognizes the revised zoning in Bridgewater and specifically in the Central Business District. I think it's probably a basic redevelopment premise that if we can develop, downtown living spaces, we can experience some regrowth in downtown business. Across the country, I think it's fairly obvious that downtowns are dying, and the biggest reason for that is probably what we've experienced through this COVID crisis is online buying. So the online marketplaces has sort of unfortunately forced a lot of small town businesses, hardware stores, and what have you, out of business. And so what we're left with is trying to redevelop downtown areas with service industries or service businesses that do not, that can't be provided in an online manner. So our focus really is to try to build restaurants, other service, coffee shops, other downtown businesses. And the first step to do that is to provide essentially the market for that. So provide the customers for that. So density in a downtown area for those towns, cities and towns that have been successful in redevelopment of their downtown areas and have brought businesses back into the downtown. Residential density is a key component. So under the zoning, our residential density limit is 18 units per acre in the Central Business District. The planning board can allow up to 26 units per acre for the zoning says for the following things, and it runs through a number of items that are appropriate, essentially density bonuses. So getting from 18 units to 26 units per acre with certain bonuses. So in our agreement, we identified areas where we think that the town could benefit from an agreement. There are provisions, let's see, a provision in here for possibly securing, for the town to ultimately secure space near the Academy building for additional parking, which is critically needed around the Academy building, and could also double for parking that would be available for downtown businesses. There's a provision in here to restore the Central Square, restore the common Veterans Memorial area, and that is negotiated as a component that would not exceed $350,000 devoted to that. We have a conceptual plan that's been agreed upon by veterans groups and an ad hoc committee that we formed a couple of years ago. But we do have a conceptual plan by Boston Architectural College, and that is the plan from which we will do our renovations in that area. And in return for that, there's a density bonus of 2 units per acre, which would be a total of 6 units, again, as provided under the new zoning. Again, we agreed to a 2 unit per acre density bonus for a total of 6 units for streetscape improvements. This would include pedestrian scale lighting, sidewalks, new sidewalks, bump outs at key intersections, and other recreational amenities and noted in a landscape plan. So those conceptually benches, again, street lighting, improved sidewalks, and that component would not exceed $350,000. The town and Mr. Pascal, West Point, agreed to a density bonus of 2 units for the placement of solar panels and other green roofing components on 2 of the buildings. And that, again, would provide 2 units, two density bonus, two units per acre. And then finally, transfer of development rights to build units that would otherwise be built on the property on the east side of Broad Street. And we provided those density bonus for those. Other than that, that's really the very basic terms of the developer's agreement. And as I said, we worked for quite a long time with Mr. Clarkson and Mr. Pascal to come to a resolution on this. And from my perspective, I think the development gives appropriate density in the central business district, and it's a density that will allow us to better recruit, especially service businesses back into the downtown area. So I'm happy to answer questions on that.
Board questions for Mr. Dutton?
Yeah, I have one question, Mr. Chairman. I believe it came up in the letter to the board, but also I noticed it also that when you have transfer of development rights, I believe the result is open space. How are we getting open space from the transfer development rights here?
That is an excellent question. Actually, what's contemplated in Mass General Law is generally open space, but the law allows. Let me see if I pull it up. The law does allow. Sorry. So Chapter 48, which is the zoning under Mass General Laws, allows for transfer of development rights in a manner that promotes open space, as Mr. Gemian mentioned, preserves farmland, promotes housing, and then sort of the catch-all other community interests. So our feeling was that the transfer of development rights in this case does satisfy, the overriding community interest in trying to create a rebirth of our downtown, and that's sort of the genesis of the TOD.
Any other board questions?
Just to make sure I entirely understand, it's a new concept for me. So that TDR essentially allows them to build, speaking plainly in this case, probably a higher, essentially up to 4 stories on the west side of the street, because they are utilizing the parcels on the east side for looks like parking going forward. Is that the base level gist of it?
I wouldn't say it has anything to do directly with the height of the building, but it does allow the addition of units that would otherwise be built on a parcel on the east side of the street to be used in the parcels on the west side of the street.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other board questions? So, Mr. Dutton, I just have a few questions on the developers agreement. So it says up, so it says in a lot of these categories, it says not to exceed or up to. What does that mean? Does that mean that it's definitely 350? It's definitely 352. Is that the amount being paid, or is it whatever it costs? If it's 100,000 to restore that, he only has to pay 100. Would we be better served to say, we obviously don't want him to have to pay more than the 350, but wouldn't we be better just to say, for the Veterans Memorial and the common improvements, 350,000, for the building out back, 352, because those say up to or not to exceed, and I think that creates some confusion.
Quite honestly, that's in there for our protection. We did certainly. I can appreciate, Mr. Pascal's, desire to limit the amount that he'd be spending, because that's perfectly natural and understandable. We wanted to make sure that if if that we had the opportunity to fully charge for something, I'll pick the monument restoration. So right now, it's highly unlikely that the monument restoration would exceed 350, but it is very possible that it'll exceed our initial estimates for a variety of reasons. And at this point, we don't know what the particular costs are going to be, or that I shouldn't say the particular costs. We don't know what the issues are going to be once we get into it. And just as an example, we have an electric box that's right near the monument. It needs replacing. We know that the electrical system needs replacing, so we want to make sure that when we do that job, we do it right. So we've gotten estimates of $75,000, but we know that once we get into it, it may very well begin to escalate, and we didn't want to cap ourselves essentially. So we left it an up to and not to exceed in order for us to make sure that we're protecting our interests in the deal.
So I guess my concern is, let's say we think the mitigation is fit, the mitigation is fair. Between the three things, it's like $1.05 million roughly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we guaranteed that $1.05 million, or could we get some lesser number if costs come in less?
We could. It could come in less. Absolutely, it could. I don't foresee. Certainly, I don't foresee the streetscape improvements coming in less. In fact, I know we have fairly specific estimates on the streetscape improvements that we're asking for, and they come in at just about that number. It is feasible that the Veterans Memorial Monument renovation could be some amount less than that. I don't suspect that it will be significantly less than that. And certainly, certainly all of these were subject to a negotiation, and as I say, Mr. Pascal negotiated from his position. We negotiated from ours, and I'm satisfied with the results.
So is it possible we want to protect what he has to put out of pocket, but we also want to make sure the town gets what we think we're voting on. So if we're asked to be looking at density bonuses and we think or we don't think that $1.05 million is fair, how do we know what we're voting on if it could be some number less? Is it possible to say $350 will be donated to the Veterans Memorial and the Common? And that way, if there's extra, we can use it to revitalize the Common as well.
Again, I think all of certainly that's without getting into the negotiations in detail. That's certainly something that we laid on the table, and the negotiation went from there. So.
Okay. So what's the payment schedule for these three components?
We haven't worked out a payment schedule yet. We are, once the planning board has approved this project, we will go back and develop the payment schedule based upon any conditions that the planning board places on the project. We will, not knowing that the deal is in place and that the approvals have been made, then we can go out, get specific pricing and a specific timeline on some of these improvements.
Will there be, so if the project developers agreement is for 10 years, $1.05 million today roughly is very different than $1.05 million 5 or 7 years from now. Will there be, as a condition, could we add escalation every year that the money's unpaid?
That would be up to the planning board. If that's something that legally fits into your conditions, then certainly you could do that.
Okay, and then I think before we vote on a TDR, the applicant would have to provide the draft language for the TDR and the zoning restriction and the public benefit that would be placed on the parcel across the street for us to review.
Correct.
And my last comment is that I'm okay, personally, I'm okay with the density bonus, but the zoning allows for 1 unit per building with the solar. And there's 2 buildings provided with solar, so that would be 2. Can we move those units somewhere else in the agreement just to comply with the zoning?
I'll have to defer to Ms. Burke on that. But if it's just a matter of, yeah, I'll have to defer and take a look at that.
Okay. Those are my questions. So any other board questions?
Yeah, I have one more, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jemian, and then Gene, I'm sorry.
Mr. Dutton, I believe you clarified it before, but could you just clarify the parameters of the developers agreement and the planning board? In other words, where does your responsibility end and ours begin in this agreement? I'm a little confused on that.
Oh, that's a great question, and that's quite understandable, especially since this is sort of a first pass. The planning board has ultimate approval authority over the project as it's presented, and you certainly have the ability to condition the project as you normally would any project that you approve or deny. In this case, the zoning calls for me in conjunction with Ms. Burke to negotiate a developer's agreement for any contemplated increase in density over the 18 units that is otherwise allowed by underlying zoning. And that's what you have here is the negotiation and the specifics of how those 26 units per acre are arrived at, and the very specifics about the units that are added or the units that are earned in return for the benefits that we see to the town. Does that answer the question?
Not really. I guess what I'm saying is, if we don't like any of it, do we override your developers agreement?
You could, absolutely. I mean, that's your prerogative. I hope you don't, but you certainly could.
I just wanted to clarify that. That's all. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Just to be clear, Mr. Dutton, if we're okay with the density bonus, but need some tweaks to the developers agreement, such as moving solar to a different area, not necessarily asking for any more money, but just making sure the agreement complies, and then trying to clear up things like not to exceed, or we could make those recommendations back to you, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other board questions? Oh, Jean, you had a question. I'm sorry.
Yes. On that piece of property that's in question, how does that work for the transfer of development rights? What will be done with that property? I realize it's a house, and today's rate is different than the estimate of what the house could sell for is different than the amount of money in the agreement.
On that one, I think I would defer to Jennifer if she wants to tackle that one. I'm not sure that, and one of the things I'm not sure that Mr. Clarkson pointed out, but the properties involved are now only, I believe, 7 different properties, 7 different assessors lots, and there was an 8th that was dropped. Correct me, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's 8 lots, and there were 9. One property was dropped, I believe.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the Bedford Street property.
All right.
Yeah, I believe she's talking about the house behind the Academy building.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. So So that house, we wrote a provision that said that you could transfer those development rights for a total of 5 units, 2 additional units. There are 3 units in the house now currently, and you can have 2 additional two additional pursuant to that. Excuse me. That if we secure that house, and if that house then comes into the ownership of the town, then obviously we need that for parking purposes. However, if the property does not come into the ownership of the town, then those additional units would not be permitted as part of this development. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
I guess
and
so.
that'll be the responsibility of the planning department and the building commissioner to track if that unit gets dropped or added.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other board questions on the?
Yeah, just with that, that's it. Like, what's the timetable for that? Is there a conceivable situation in which these properties are developed, that building is not going to transfer to the town, but those 5 units are already built? I mean, obviously, we're not, you wouldn't tear down a floor of one of these buildings just to ensure that complies with the agreement. So, what's the kind of enforcement you can actually, do on that?
No CO is going to be issued until that part of the developer's agreement has been resolved.
Okay, perfect.
Moving on. So I'd like to get. See. So before I move on to public comment, does the board have any questions to either is Mrs. Baptista still with us?
I'm still here.
Or the design team or the applicant? Are there any board questions before we open it up to public input?
I have one, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Geller.
So I'd like to talk about the proposed parking lot across the street that is supposedly already approved for a proposed restaurant, where this is a new project and it was done back in '92 and it's now 2020. I mean, does the drainage system underneath meet today's building codes and everything else, and stormwater and anything else that needs to be done? Your parking spaces comply? And are they, is the proposal where it's in such disarray to literally tear up all the asphalt and sidewalks and rebuild it completely?
Ms. Baptista, would you like to take that one?
I don't have all the good answers. I don't have all the good answers for that one.
Right.
At the time that was approved by the planning board, yes, it met those requirements. Would you rip up an existing parking lot now that you're using because it doesn't meet today's standards? No, probably not. So in that regard, it was reviewed, it was approved. Granted, it was a long time ago. It's still valid. It's still there. It still exists. It still functions. It's just under the ground. No one sees it. It's in disrepair. What are we trying to do? I would say, yeah, we would reclimate and repave, fix the parking lot, fix the landscaping. But without further review, as the condition and do the parking spots meet the requirements? Again, they did at the time, and it was approved, and you don't rip up old parking lots to meet new requirements.
Well, it's a new project.
So with the response to the letter that we're going to provide, we will address those concerns in detail in writing.
Okay. So they're going to test, you're going to test the underground drainage system and make sure that it's all working and everything else?
We would probably have to, I would say, at the least camera the underground system to see what is still there, in case there is a root in the way or some sort of compromised pipe. Yeah, we would probably investigate the underground system.
Right, okay.
So I think to Mr. Geller's point, though, is this is a new project, and that if that land is being considered part of one project, this is, this old parking lot is now being considered as part of the new mixed-use development. So I would check with town staff and the town engineer, but I would think we'd want that developed in accordance with the rest of this site and meet the requirements of the special permit criteria. But I would defer to the town engineer and the town planner on that for advice.
So noted. Thank you.
I've got that noted as well, Mr. Chairman, and I know we did provide the town engineer with the existing plan that Rebecca referenced, but we'll certainly yield to the comments of the town engineer and the staff on how best to incorporate that.
Okay. And that's also assuming that, I mean, this board has to vote. We're going to have to review the TDR, correct, Ms. Burke?
Yes.
To see if the board is, let's get more feedback from the public and then we can go from there. So any other board comments?
I'd like to make one comment, Mr. Driscoll, if I may.
Sure, Mr. Jimmy, I'm sorry.
Before we go into public commentary, I may be repeating myself from the last meeting we had on this, but first of all, I'm in favor of a project like this. I think that since I've been on the board, which was supposed to be for 3 months, but it's been 7 years now, and when I was on the board in the 80s, this is probably the largest project that I can think of. And it's probably the most important project for the town, since it is, in a sense, the town in terms of people driving through, they will see it. So I think we have to move along on this project slowly to make sure everything is right. My main concern right now is the size and the design of the buildings. I would have much rather seen a 3-story building or a 2-story building on both sides and a much different design. I'm concerned about design. I would prefer seeing maybe 2 or 3 different possible alternatives. When this town, obviously much of the architecture in this town needs to be upgraded, but sometimes we have actually, in building something new, come up with something nice. For instance, as much as there is controversy about the CVS building being put up in town, it does sort of fit in. It's not just a regular box that CVS normally puts up. And I would like to see something like that. And I'm not convinced that what we have in front of us right now are designs that I would like to see on this street. So, and I would also, I know we will discuss the TDR later, but I do think, based on my readings of TDRs, that there should be open space. And I do not regard a parking lot as open space. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to get to the board comments, so the public comments. Do we have any other board questions or comments? Okay, so can I get some volunteers? Mrs. Garino, maybe? Or Mr. Jemian to read some of the letters, and maybe Miss Burke, or I could take one. We did receive 5 different pieces of correspondence from either townspeople or abutters that I'd like to read in the record, and then open it up to the public for comment or questions.
Mr. Chairman, I happen to have Janet Hansen's letter in front of me if you'd like me to read it.
That would be excellent.
Okay. This is from Janet Hansen, 665 Pleasant Street, dated the 15th, September 15th, the Town of Bridgewater Planning Board. I'm writing again to express my concerns with the proposed buildings planned on 60-86 Broad Street. I viewed the drawings posted on the Town of Bridgewater Document Center site and still feel that they do not blend in well with the town. I have no objections for the development there, depending, of course, on what type of businesses are being proposed for those sites, but would hope that the buildings would be a better blend. As I mentioned in my last letter, I feel that these designs are too big for that area and that they do not have the colonial small town feel that have potential to be overwhelming in size. I would have thought they would try to have them match or blend in with the nature of the center of town better. I have to repeat this statement I made on my letter dated August 5th, 2020. One of the proposed buildings looks like a house. That looks fine. It is the other three buildings that are not conducive to the area. And if you look at the colorized version, it is so unrealistic. Broad Street does not look like that. If they're going to submit a drawing plan, it should be more realistic. It will not look like that at all when done. It makes Broad Street look wider than it is along with the sidewalk. The building will stick out. It is not blended. It's not a blending of buildings. It's a congested area with traffic, etc. These buildings designed to not reflect what it will actually look like and be like when completed if allowed to proceed with the proposed designs. Also, they're proposing a parking garage under one of the buildings. Are they proposing a parking garage under one of the buildings? Is parking across the street? Who will able to utilize the parking? Tenants or public? It's not clear to me. Why can't they build buildings that are more colonial style and still serve their functions? I know they are planning business on street level and apartments on upper, but what kind of businesses? How is it going to affect traffic flow in and out of Broad Street, Stetson and Pearl Street? I remember when the developers were proposing to build where Home Depot is now. Many of us requested that the building be colonial style, which they did in some way. We had many long nights debating the plans. The other buildings along the stretch of the road also tried to do the same. Cumberland Farms did their best too. I know that stretch of Route 104 is not the same as Broad Street, as that area 104 is in the Gateway District, but it is done in the center of town. Bridgewater Pediatrics built a nice building, and that style would look a lot better than what West Point Realty is proposing. I'm interested in traffic studies, the proposed size of the buildings, and what kind of businesses are expected or anticipated to apply to in there with the planning board's approval, of course, and hope that we will get answers to questions and have opportunity to express our concerns with proposed styles. I've been a resident of Bridgewater for 42 years and have seen many changes in that time, with the most happening in the last 20 years or less, the fastest. The town is changing, but I, like many others, would like to try to preserve the Bridgewater that attracted many to live here. Yes, the area is in this pro spot, needs to have something done to clean it up, but not at the expense of changing the character of the center of town. I know some of my comments are repeated from my 8/5/2020 letter, but hope that both letters will be read, submitted to the planning board. Unfortunately, we will not be able to attend, as I will be in another town meeting being held at the same time, but hope my comments will be taken into consideration. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Janet Hanson.
Okay, we also received one from Dr. Carlton Hunt, 80 Austin Street. Do you have that one, Jean?
I have it.
Do you mind reading that?
No, not at all. From Dr. Carlton Hunt, dated 9/10/2020, to Jennifer Burke et al., subject for planning board consideration. Thanks for providing the link to the most recent documents regarding Broad Street development. I find some improvements in the documentation, but it is not clear if all required submission boxes have been checked. I assume there is a checklist that the public can see regarding site plan submission. If not, one should be developed and published. My initial review question was, does the new developers agreement replace, supplement, or amend the original submission? On close reading, it appears to clarify but not change the original agreement, other than changing the density due to the adjustment in the project acreage. The proof is in Part A, which states, in quotes, "and all approvals for the subject project shall be encompassed in the original submission," end quote. Fortunately, the agreement recognizes the planning board's role in the process, specifically, quote, with said provisions subject to review by the planning board, end quote. The agreement omits the fact that all site plans and special permits are subject to planning board review, deliberation, modification, if it so deems, and final approval against CBD zoning. Therefore, I submit my comments on the original developers agreement remain relevant for planning board consideration. On further reading, I find Part B, Item E, curious. MGL General Laws, Part 1, Title 7, Chapter 40A, Section 9, states, quote, zoning ordinances or bylaws may provide for special permits authorizing the transfer of development rights of land within or between districts. These zoning ordinances or bylaws should include incentives such as increases in density of population, intensity of use, amount of floor space, or percentage of lot coverage that encourage the transfer of development rights in a manner that protect open space, preserve farmland, promote housing for persons of low and moderate income, or further other community interests. Provided, however, that nothing herein shall prohibit a zoning ordinance or bylaw from allowing transfer of development rights to be permitted as of right without the need for a special permit or other discretionary zoning approval. The law clearly states TDRs are established through zoning, intended to encourage protection of open space and promoting low and moderate income housing. I know the town does not have such zoning in place. To my knowledge, the one passed by town meeting around 2010 on Bedford Street was never finalized by proper deed restrictions on the sending and receiving parcels. I do not think the town can successfully defend this TDR in a court of law. Why? While the proposed TDR is within a district, it does not preserve open space unless a parking counts as open space, and it does not address low to moderate income housing. As proposed, the TDR only gives the developer incentives to build structures that do not meet the CBD zoning and design requirements. Why do we want 45-foot tall buildings on one side of Broad Street when both sides could be developed as stylish 2 to 3 story buildings with commercial space and parking? I refer you to the prior significant effort to find a way to develop TDR zoning to support the redevelopment in the CBD. That effort ended with a zoning map appropriately depicting sending and receiving areas, but never went anywhere per town manager's decision. What has changed since that project ended? Why does the town now think a TDR for parcels that face each other across the street is an appropriate and legal strategy? Where is the underlying zoning to support the subject TDR? Is the town planning to propose such zoning to the town council? MGL makes it clear that such zoning must be on the books. If not planning to do a proper TDR, why not? The 3 monetary elements of the agreement seem good, but it is not clear what the payment schedule is. Why are not these details provided in the agreement? Without a payment schedule, the agreement has no teeth. Why is the developer given 10 years to perform? I thought our special permit zoning requires performance within 2 years. Please correct me if I'm wrong. If not, please inform the public concerning the plan to modify that requirement for this project and why it is needed. This developer has reneged on several projects on Broad Street in the past. Thus, we have significant demonstrated risk of non-performance. Moreover, we have waited too long for the project to come forward and very much need development of the proposed housing and commercial space sooner, not later. I did not find the planned mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units as required under CBD zoning. Does the plan contain this information? And does it meet the allowed number of bedrooms established by CBD zoning? I still only see architectural drawings of the proposed buildings, which are subject to specific criteria under our CBD zoning. Please clarify why these architectural renderings are acceptable for a special permit site plan considered by the PB. I find the streetscape plan a concept, not an engineer stamped plan. I point again that the document contains a diagram of a street, not in Bridgewater. We do not have a Minot Street. Will the town call this out and make it correct before the next hearing on this project? The drainage document is voluminous and detailed. However, I did not see an engineer's signed plan for street and drainage improvements in the documents I was provided or reviewed. Does this document meet all legal requirements? Are there other documents not yet provided? The words practical level appear in the document on 60 to 62 Broad Street and others. What does that mean? Who decides what practical is? When is it quantified? As posited, it is in the eye of the beholder, not on paper. This should be quantified through detailed engineering diagrams. Thank you for the opportunity to review these documents. Carlton Hunt.
Pat, you're on mute.
Now, do you want the one from Jim Candido?
Do you want me to read that? You can take a rest and do one of the big ones?
One of the what ones?
One of the longer ones?
Yeah, if I can find them.
I think Miss Burke has one that we don't have, so maybe she could do that one. But I'll read the one from Mr. Candido to give you a break.
Okay.
This was dated August 17th, 2020, to the Bridgewater Planning Board, Bridgewater, Mass. I watched the hearing for the Broad Street project the other night. I noticed that on one of the slides, which is not part of the packet that I received from the town in the form of an email, the slide in question showed the different parcels of the project, A, B, C, and D, etc. I don't understand why the parcel on Stetson Street is part of the Broad Street project. The house at 18 Stetson Street has been updated to a college lodging house and is occupied. Can you ask the question? I am not sure what Mr. Pascal is planning for the lodging house. We hope he doesn't plan on taking it down and pushing the town to build an access road out onto Stetson Street. This would never get approved. As mentioned, the sketches look like ugly college dorms or the walkover shoe factory building. His only attention is to the dollar and not to the aesthetics and architecture. Thanks, Jim Candido, 37 Stetson Street in Bridgewater. We received one from a James Walsh. Do you have that in front of you, Jean?
No, I don't.
Does anybody have that one from Mr. Walsh in front of them? I think it came in this afternoon.
Is that?
I'll take it if you want, Mr. Chair.
Say that again.
Yeah, I have it up. I can take it if you'd like.
Do you want to do a couple pages and I'll do a couple pages? I mean, tell me when you want to stop and go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take the first three, I guess.
Well, the first three, one of them's all pitches. You got to go a little further.
I'll take the first four. Good,
All right.
Good enough. Let me see. To whom it may concern, from James and Wall, 60 Crescent Street, Bridgewater, Mass. To whom it may concern, I am writing to express. Sorry, a little problem with the screen there. Looks like. I'm writing to express my concerns and suggestions about the proposed development at 60 to 80 Broad Street, 60 to 88 Broad Street. I would request that this letter please be entered into the record at the public hearing this evening. Background. Let me preface my concerns by saying that I am excited about this development. Any new development, particularly one of this scale, is an opportunity to enhance and restore the character of our historic town. The areas along the northern edge of Central Square, including the Broad Street site, are an especially great opportunity given the historic assets and character that have been lost to insensitive development since the mid-20th century. This mixed-use project will restore greatly needed commercial space to Broad Street corridor, and its residents will provide foot traffic to enliven our central business district. Definition and character of the Broad Street corridor. As noted in provision E of the developer's agreement between the town and West Point Realty, the town must certify that the plans as submitted meet the standards of harmonious and preserve and enhance the character of the surrounding area. To certify this provision, we must define A, the boundaries of the surrounding area, and B, the character of that area. Only then can we determine if the design is harmonious and preserves and enhances the character. A, surrounding area. The site is near the center of a roughly 0.3 mile stretch of Broad Street that connects Summer and Main Streets to the railroad tracks. This stretch is hereafter referred to as the Broad Street Corridor, or BSC. For nearly 2 centuries, the BSC has been the primary connection between Central Square and the commercial and industrial areas clustered around the railroad. Character. As part of the larger CBD, the BSC is a mixed-use zone that continues the tradition of historic New England village centers. As outlined below, the BSC has a mixed-use character that has evolved over hundreds of years of pedestrian, streetcar, and railroad-driven development along Broad Street. In identifying which sites contribute to the character of the BSC, it is critical to note the period of development circa 1950 to circa 2000 that was inconsistent with the goals of mixed-use, pedestrian-driven development. Many of the sites and structures that were built during this period are inconsistent with the function and goals of the BSC and should not be considered when defining the BSC's character. These sites include the A&P, now Walgreens, shopping plaza that demolished several storefronts along the street in favor of buildings set far back from the street with a vast parking lot in front. To Cumberland Farms, now D'Angelo's Sandwich Shop, building and parking area that, while set appropriately along the street, has a street-facing parking lot and a facade with inappropriate metal panels. 3. The Cumberland Farms shopping plaza that is set far back from the street and faces Broad Street only with a parking lot. 4. The storefronts housing Callie's Tanning Club, LA Nails, and Chateau Jewelers that have metal panel facades, though they also have appropriate setbacks and even some mixed use. 5. The Friendly's building that is set far back from the street and is surrounded on 3 sides by parking lot. 6. The vast parking lot between Bruno's Pizzeria and the Yankee Clipper. Given those exclusions, the analysis of the BSC's character should focus on its structures and development up until circa 1950 and after circa 2000. This is the character that we should use as a goal for harmony and enhancement, not that of the sites excluded above. The BSC has 3 primary zones, each with its own architectural character that is rooted in its historic functions. Number 1, the Southern Zone. Stretching from the intersection with Main and Summer Streets to 51 Broad Street, Chateau Jewelers, on the east, and 62 Broad Street, former Academy Lanes Bowling Alley to the west. This zone is an extension of the commercial area that borders Central Square. In dense rows of shops, where they remain, give it the character of an old New England village, see historical figures 1, 2, and 3. Structures rise no taller than 3 stories and generally have clapboard, brick, or masonry facades, open gables facing the street, or flat roofs in traditional styling. Structures are set immediately adjacent to the street. Key to the streetscape are trees lining the edge of the sidewalk that softens the expanse of hard surfacing. Also see figure 1.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I was the author of this. I thought this would just be kind of considered by the board while they were reviewing. I'd be happy to just summarize this in public comment and kind of save the agony of all the attendees.
It's up to the chair, I suppose. You're muted, Pat.
It's his letter.
Well, typically, we read all the correspondence for the public record. Are you okay with us finishing it, or would you like us to stop reading it?
I think it'd be more effective if I just sum it up after. We could stop reading it. Thank you, though.
Okay, so we'll just come back to you on public comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Works for me.
And I think we have Ms. Burke. We received one from that we don't have, I think, came to you. Would you mind reading that? Ms. Burke? Ms. Burke, Levis?
Yeah, she's there.
Sorry. I
Okay.
was muted, sorry. Startled. We received a letter late today from Gina Gusconi at 35 Ball Avenue. Dear Mr. Driscoll, I'm writing to express my thoughts on the development of properties by West Point Realty. I have reviewed the documents provided by the Community Economic Development Office, and I have some questions and concerns. It should be noted that I am not against the development of these properties. What I am opposed to is the plan is submitted. I would like to address the following areas. In my opinion, the size and looks of the building are not compatible to the area, specifically being in the Central Business District, CBD. One of the four-story buildings are too tall. Oh no, sorry. One, the four-story buildings are too tall and are too large footprint-wise compared to the others in the area. Two, the styles of the 3 4-story buildings look to me more like factories. Yes, Bridgewater does have a history of its factories, but we don't need to replicate in the CBD. Why not 2 to 3-story buildings that look with a look that would blend in better into the area? 78 apartments is a lot for the area, and with them come added traffic and drains on our public services, police, fire, water, schools, etc. These areas are already overutilized. Is there an approximation of school-aged children that would be in the apartments? Each apartment is given 1 parking space, but what about residents that have more than 1 car? I'm all for the businesses to create economic development, improve business retail options in the CBD, but not at all for that many apartments. Why not leave some open space so it blends more into our rural town look? Traffic is a big concern of mine with the proposed development. The area is plenty congested now without adding new businesses and 78 apartments. Will existing traffic only be allowed to turn towards the center, or will they be allowed to turn left towards the tracks? Will entering traffic be allowed to turn left into the properties coming from the center? If the latter is allowed, the traffic backup heading north could and will be horrendous at times. Contrary to the report, I feel the number of vehicles entering and exiting at rush hours would have an impact. Before I retired, I went that way to work, and even the number of cars cited in the traffic study would have a definite impact. I do question the traffic study. The study showed not too many pedestrians or bicycles. The study was completed in March when there wouldn't be. In warmer months, there are many more walkers out. Also, I would hope that the company that conducted the study would update their report and West Point Realty resubmit their report. There were too many inconsistencies, i.e. Spring Street and Hill Street have never connected Broad Street to Summer Street, and the left lane coming into the center in an easterly direction is for straight and left turns. These may not be major consequence, but are unprofessional in mind for both companies to submit as part of the application. Is anything planned for the property across the street? Additional parking maybe? The town engineer's review noted wetlands. Is proper distancing compliance being taken into consideration? Thank you for the opportunity to provide a citizen's view on the project. I have lived in Bridgewater in the same house in the Broad Street side of town all my life. I have always had tremendous pride in our town and want to see the best for it in the future. As previously stated, I have no problem with developing the properties for in reference for economic development. Rather, my concern and opposition are as to how and the usage. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you again, Gina Gusconi, 35 Ball Avenue, Bridgewater, Mass.
Okay, and just so the applicant knows and the public knows, I don't want to read the 20-page document that the staff prepared for us, but we did post that in the comment section, correct, Mr. Romulus?
Yes, it looks like that was posted earlier.
All right, and we can post that maybe on the town website if people want to view it or something. So I think to go through that it would be painstaking.
I'm sorry.
And then the other thing is we did receive an email from Mr. Antonero, the town engineer. He was unable to be with us tonight, but could we just read that? It's not that long, just so people know what the initial engineering issues are and the applicant knows where Mr. Antonero stands.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I can read it. So this was sent Monday, September 14th. It reads, Jen, the proposed parking plan shown on the east side of Broad Street for a single-story restaurant across the street on the 1993 Silva Engineering Associates plans that you forwarded does not include any stormwater management system design report and no in situ soil evaluation test pits for groundwater determination regarding the stormwater management system design have been documented. How does the parking plan that's designed for a specific restaurant use in 1993 fit with the current development proposed by Mr. Pascal? Is there a current proposal for a restaurant on the entire first floor of one of the proposed buildings? The current traffic impact assessment does not appear to consider the parking configuration and circulation. The plans need to also be signed and stamped by a registered professional land surveyor. With regard to the current mixed-use development proposal, there is an apparent wetland system that is on the west side of the existing buildings, including the former Friendly's ice cream site. This wetland system needs to be shown on the existing condition site plan and the proposed condition site plan. The wetland system may trigger a jurisdictional review by the Conservation Commission. I witnessed soil evaluation test pits excavated at the 3 building parcels site along the west side of Broad Street. The stormwater management system needs to account for how emergency overflow will be handled. However, the stormwater management system should consider the fact that this is a redevelopment proposal. Therefore, strict application of the stormwater standards is not mandatory. The connectivity of the parking spaces, traffic flow, and screening of the parking areas plan should be provided.
Yeah.
Regards,
All right.
LS Town Engineer.
Okay, so I think that's all the correspondence, and we posted the 60 to 88 Broad Street special permit and site plan review by the town in the comments. And instead of going through that tonight, we'll get it to the developer and post it online if you could do that, Mr. Romulus. So, go ahead.
Yes, I'll have that up tomorrow.
Okay, so with that, I don't know if you want to start with the chats and see if we have any participants that would like to make public comments. We just ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. If they're repetitive comments, we ask that you not make them if the point's already been made, and we just ask that you state your name and address for the record. So, Mr. Romulus, if you wouldn't mind handling that as people raise their hands or they're in the chats, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yes. So the first comment was in the chat was made by Peter Columbotus. If he is with us, you're free to unmute yourself and speak.
I don't recall which comment you're referring to.
The first one is the zoning does not in fact provide a project like this. There is no provision in our zoning for a transfer of development from one parcel to another.
Yeah, I guess to the chair of the planning board, could you explain what mechanism within the zoning ordinance provides for a transfer of development with the project?
I think we'd have to. I can't answer that. I think, and Ms. Burke can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that first of all we need to see a proposal from the applicant with a deed restriction, and then see if it complies with zoning from our zoning enforcement officer, Mr. Solari.
Well, I will say that the zoning section 19.048A allows for a transfer of development rights under the mixed use for central business district.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any additional comments, Mr. Columbotus?
all set, thanks.
It looks like the next one from, I believe from Sean. Timothy, the architect on the applicant side, mentioned how many bikes per unit, but did not say how many cars per unit. Question mark.
Does Timothy wish to speak? Was it Sean? Sean, I'm sorry. Does Sean wish to speak? Do you see any hands up or anything, Mr. Romulus? If not, we can move on.
I do see that Sean is in the audience. If you'd like to speak, you can unmute yourself. If not, we'll move on, as the chairman said.
I'm sorry, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, Timothy.
This is Timothy Johnson, the architect.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Yes. For the 7 projects, total commercial required is 127 parking spaces. Total residential required is 111. Total parking required is 238 spaces. We are providing 213 spaces, or 25 less than what's required.
Okay, next, do we have any other, next question?
Let's see. So, a question from Daniels, just regarding the green space and open space on the plan.
Was Daniels available? Would he like to speak?
Yeah, it's Jeff Daniels at 20 Maple Avenue here in Bridgewater. I actually had a couple questions. Do you want me to read them all now or just wait till they appear?
No, do them all at once, please.
Okay, so the first one is just the question about green space. I'm wondering if there's green space given the number of residents of the properties.
We have a, I can try to answer that, Ms. Burke. We have a requirement that 20% of the property is vegetated. And that was one of the, deficiencies noted in the town response.
Okay. Also, there's already quite a few empty commercial spaces in the downtown that have been vacant for a long time. So I'm just wondering what the plan is to ensure that businesses open there and remain there.
That's not really a question for the board.
Is that just any other?
That's the developer's prerogative.
Any other statements, Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, I guess those questions. How is maintenance handled after the development? Is that this group that manages that?
But we will manage it or have a professional management company on hand.
Okay.
I don't know if that was heard.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if we've looked at the cost per square foot for this development compared to the market average.
I'm not sure how that's.
I'm not sure what you're looking for there.
I'm just wondering if the pricing to develop this whole project is normal. I heard that we spent a lot more on some other projects in the past that ended up not going well. So I just wondered if we had compared to market average for commercial development.
Well, this is Ms. Burke, just to clarify, this is a private project, not a town project.
That's correct.
So just going forward with public comments, the board really shouldn't engage with answering questions. So if the public comments could be more statements, and then if you do have a question, you could submit it via email to the Community and Economic Development Office. The board isn't really prepared to answer those at this point. If maybe Mr. Romulus could submit the email address for questions that could be answered at the next meeting, on the chat feature?
Yes. So, oh no.
Do we have any more public comments?
So the next public comment that I saw in the chat came from Mark Lindy. All discussions should be detailed at a public meeting. It's the public's business. I'm not sure if there's any additional comments that would like to be made.
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Elijah, I believe you skipped over Carlton.
Carlton messaged me privately saying that he will not make any additional comments.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
Let's see. The next one is Marilee Hunt. How does housing on one side of Route 18 with parking on the other side of Route 18 enhance public safety downtown?
Yes, that pretty much sums up what I was asking. And so it can just go in there like that. Might I suggest that maybe these comments can somehow be added into the record? Because some people have made some significant comments in here that you could look at later on and digest. And if there are some of them that need answers, answer them. And maybe some of them just are heads up that somebody's thinking about that like they would at any public comments.
Okay.
Let's see. The next comment is, I do see that there are some hands raised. I will be addressing them as well. The next comment in the chat is Michael McCormick. The developers agreement seems like it really needs to be tightened up to protect the town. It feels like there are many loopholes with terminology more in favor of the developer.
Does Mr. McCormick want to speak in addition to that, or?
Forest chameleons, just over an inch long.
Okay, moving on, Mr. Romulus.
Yeah, so the next one is Dennis Asai. How does the developer and the town propose to handle the increase in traffic related to this project? I think that was mentioned previously.
I didn't catch the name of that individual like to speak.
Dennis is the first name.
If you don't see any hands or anything, moving on.
No.
Dennis Ashe, I think, is the last name.
Yes. Okay. I guess I'll move on to the next one. Let's see.
I see a comment about people requesting letters. Is that something that we can post on the website as well, or should we just send it to the individuals requesting?
Yep, no, we'll post all the public comment letters, the town engineer's report and the staff report to the website tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any comments additional in the chat, so I'll go to the raised hands.
1 second, Elijah. There's Brian Frederick says that Beverly Albaugh, 85 Broad Street, has questions.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yes.
We're trying to hear from Brian. Is that correct, Ms. Burke?
Yeah.
Hello?
Can't hear.
Questions that I have heard tonight are my concerns. I live directly.
I think
Dropped off.
Beverly keeps breaking up and we can't hear her.
All right, we can move on, and then if she comes back on, we can hear from her again.
Okay, so with the raised hands, I'm going to go to Mike.
Hold on, do we need James Walsh also?
Yeah, he's got his hand raised. Go ahead, Elijah. Who are you going to first?
Yeah, Mike.
Hello all, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike O'Connor from 60 Vera Drive in Bridgewater. I grew up in Bridgewater, went through the school systems, and also attended Bridgewater State. I followed this project for quite a bit of time now and have some disappointment in the lack of progression with the revitalization of the downtown area. Obviously, it's been in disrepair and it's looked bad for years and years and years. And I would like to see, as a young millennial professional living in Bridgewater, some progression moving forward with this project, whether it is what West Point Development has proposed or something that the town and West Point Development can come together and agree upon. I think it's important to push forward with this as the town continues to grow. There's been a lot of concerns about housing and traffic and parking and whatnot, but as the town continues to grow and there's not a lot more land in New England at all, I mean, you have to start building density at some point, and I think this is the right place to do it with the college, being in the center of town and kind of tying everything else together. I think this could be a great center stone project for the town. I'm in support of it, and I wish that the town would continue to be progressive and work with Mr. Pascal here on this project, because a developer that's willing to build something like this only comes around once in a while, and it is very important to continue to work with him before he can change his mind and turn away. So I'm in favor. I wish there was more progression here in the town. I understand the concerns about keeping it quaint in the way it was for a long time, but as a millennial that has been through the system, the school system and the university, we need some more progression in that downtown area. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person I see is Pat Neary.
Unmute. Hello. I agree with many comments that were made this evening. Carlton had mentioned there is no Minot Street in Bridgewater. So I think there were a couple of issues with the developer's presentation. However, I am very happy to see that something will be done with this property, and Mr. Pascal did a great job on the renovation on the building next door to our academy building. So I do have a couple of comments. I should have probably written a letter, but you'll have to listen to me for a minute. The developer's agreement, as Mr. James Walsh pointed out, that the town certifies that the plans meet the standards of harmonious and preserve and enhance the character of the surrounding area as required. Except for one of the buildings, the other three have a very institutional look. These designs do look like the old building on Perkins Street, and I don't think that was the goal of the agreement. Bridgewater is a very old historic New England community. These designs portray none of that. And I'd like to ask Mr. Tim Johnson, what is fiber cement material? Is that, do I have the right language, fiber cement, for the exterior finish? Perhaps you can explain that when I'm finished. We just don't want the buildings in that area to look like the West Bridgewater Police Station. And another bad example would be the laundromat at the corner of Stetson and Broad Street. So perhaps the drawings are just suggestions and better drawings are forthcoming. We need to have a New England look, something that represents our historic town. not just big square blocks that are in the sketches. And we also really need more green area, but I guess our planning board is going to address that. Also, we must take climate change seriously. We've missed many opportunities with all these, the new apartments, the huge building on Elm Street. They're all, I don't even know if the one on Elm Street is solar ready, but most of our new buildings and facilities are solar ready. They should be a definite time requirement, even though I know we're going to have 2 solar ready buildings, I think, in this agreement. There's got to be a time frame for that to actually be in effect. We can't just keep trashing our planet. And I think that's probably it right now. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Okay, the final hand raised, it looks like it is James Walsh.
Oh, okay, it looks like I'm unmuted now. Hi, James Walsh, 60 Crescent Street. You might remember me as the person who almost put you all to sleep. Apologies for that. But I did want to just provide some notes because I thought one kind of part of this that will be really key is a lot of the issues that are coming up about this seem to be about the design of the buildings, among other things. But I think, the language in the developer agreement where we're talking about harmonious and preserving and enhancing the character of the surrounding area, it will be really important for the board or whoever's involved to define that. What is the surrounding area? What exactly is that character? So that's I kind of detailed more of what I personally think that might be in the letter. A few just suggestions off the bat. I know a lot of people are talking about the height of the buildings, kind of how they're a little bit overbearing on the street. And I do agree. And I wonder, these are pretty deep lots, and maybe a suggestion is, as long as they look fairly good at the, at the street, like you could kind of push some of the bulk of them massing to the back of the lot. Maybe there are some opportunities in there to at least make that streetscape look a little bit more in character with the rest of the town and a little bit more colonial. But once those are resolved, I kind of agree with everyone else or with some people that I think this is a really great step in the right direction, that I think mixed use development as well will really, really help restore the downtown area. And thank you for the time.
Thank you.
It looks like there are 2 more comments. One from Melissa Raymondetta at 317 Lakeside Drive. The project as proposed would alter the entire landscape, look and feel of the central business district if left as is. Bridgewater is a town, not a city, and the buildings as proposed are more appropriate in an urban environment. The project needs scaling down in size, increased open space, and a greater tie to tie in architecturally to Central Square. Thank you. And then it looks like Bill Wood would like to speak as well.
Thank you. Bill Wood, 388 Hayward Street, also District 6 representative on the town council. I, along with, I think it was P. Colnavatis, was the sponsor of the zoning change for the Central Business District that hopefully will make this project move forward. First of all, I want to applaud everyone involved. There's been an awful lot of work, both from the developer and our economic development group, town manager, now the planning board. I'm optimistic you guys will work out all the aesthetics about the buildings and whatnot. But I want to point out 2 key elements of this project and a similar project. I really call this the cornerstone of downtown revitalization. The key to downtown revitalization and filling all the vacant storefronts that we have right now is walk-by traffic, so pedestrian traffic. And you don't get a lot of pedestrian traffic from the neighborhoods today. You certainly don't see a lot of it from the college. And one of the goals, I think, of this project, and we can talk about density and whatnot, is to bring that pedestrian traffic downtown. So it not only benefits the new businesses and maybe a restaurant or two in the new buildings, but also benefits the nearby restaurants. So there's a new Brazilian takeout place that's just opening in the district. I think it has 0 parking, so it's all on-street parking. There's potential other new developments going on. But there, uptown, downtown, there's a lot of empty space. So my sister and I's empty. There's a couple other storefronts empty. There's empty spaces on Broad Street. When you drive down Broad Street at night, it's dark, it's vacant. There's nothing happening there. So the goal of this is, in my mind anyway, is to bring the pedestrian traffic downtown for lunch and dinner and, boutique shopping that goes on. And this hopefully would spur other development to go on. One of the key changes when we looked at the downtown zoning was that if you look left and right, the zoning density are much higher. So the property on AA roofing under the development, I may be wrong, planning board can correct me, but I think the density down there is 30 units per acre, and out at just to the, I call it to the left, but to the west of Broad Street, density is at 25 per acre. So at one point, density had been marked at 18 per acre downtown. And so you end up with, some residents above storefronts, but not a lot of pedestrians. And certainly, if you walk downtown a lot, there's not a lot of foot traffic going on. And boutique shops and non-destination shops, by that I mean that look for people window shopping, require foot traffic. And I'm hoping that this project, when it's finished, will bring that downtown and help really start the full downtown revitalization cycle that needs to go on. Thank you very much.
Right. Did you cut out Mr. Wood, or are you all set? I'm sorry.
All set. Thank you.
Ramos, is that it for
That is it.
Okay. All right, so next steps, Ms. Burke and Mr. Romulus.
Would suggest that the board continue the hearing to a date and time certain to provide the applicant and his team time to address the comments made tonight and in the memo provided by myself and the town engineer, however long that may be.
So, Mrs. Baptista, do you think, or Mr. Clarkson, do you think that all this can be achieved by the next meeting? Would you like to go 2 meetings, or what do you prefer?
Mr. Chairman, I'll certainly defer to Silva Engineering if they need additional time, but I believe the comments, most of the comments tonight were thoughtful, and I think we can provide adequate answers before your next meeting. Could I make a brief closing statement after the board decides when to continue to?
Yeah, why don't you make it, all right, so why don't we circle in Mrs. Baptista?
Thank you. We have to investigate Mr. Interno's wetland claim. We have to develop a landscape buffer plan. We have to develop a lighting plan. I recommend that we actually need a little bit more than 2 weeks. And I would prefer to go to the 4-week time frame.
Okay, and just so we're clear, the architectural site plan that we're still looking at now, the goal is to have that become an actual engineered site plan and have curbing, design shown, lighting.
Correct.
Everything that we expect on an engineered site plan.
Correct.
Circulation, etc.
And so on and so forth. Yes.
Okay. So it's up. I'm willing to. Mr. Clarkson and Ms. Baptista, it's up to you guys to decide. 1 meeting out or 2 meetings out. We can consider either one.
So the dates are, just for your information, October 7th or October 21st.
21st.
Is that did Mr. Clarkson say that? I'm sorry, 21st?
I'm sorry, that was me, Patrick. That was Jim Pascal.
All right, okay.
I think the second meeting would probably make the most sense to allow Rebecca and her team ample time to appropriately put this plan together and be complete.
Can I just say something, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, Mr. Jemian, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that in this process between now and the next meeting, that the engineering is obviously got to be looked at, but I just would hope that they look at the design of the building too in the meantime. There's been enough public input, and I think from the board also, that there is a need to look at the height and the design of those buildings before we move forward. Thank you.
So with that, Mr. Jemian, I think we should also, if we're going to be considering a TDR, have a draft TDR that the board could consider. Because we're considering things in a developer's agreement that we don't have information on, like, so I think we should have a look at the TDR as well.
Mhm.
Any other, Mr. Clarkson, did you make your closing comment yet, or would you like to make it? I'm sorry.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, these were obviously very detailed comments. On behalf of Mr. Pascal, I just wanted to thank both the members of the planning board and the public for a very thoughtful meeting. I think there's a lot of good information for us to take back. I think we appreciate that the tone and the tenor generally was very productive and positive, and I think that's really important because, as I mentioned at the beginning, this team has put in several years worth of work to get to this point here tonight, working very closely with the town. Very quickly, just address one issue that was raised during the public comment when it was suggested that this developer has reneged on several projects on Broad Street. I would just submit, knowing Mr. Pascal for some time, that his presence in Bridgewater has been the opposite. And he's not only has he never reneged on a project, but he's invested millions of dollars into the community and has received the praise of most of the department heads in the community for the attention to detail that he has and the care that he takes for all of his properties. And I think that's relevant because questions were raised about this project and how it would be maintained. And I think you can point to the other projects that Jim has done in the community as evidence of the quality of his work and of the maintenance. So we really appreciate this time. Look forward to coming back on October 21st, having these questions answered and moving forward.
Okay, so if there's no more board questions or comments, we could entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to October 21st.
I'll make a motion to continue the hearing for Broad Street project to Wednesday, October 21st at 6:30 p.m.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mrs. Garino. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A second by Mr. McDonald. Any discussion? Okay, so we have to do a roll call vote. So Mr. Geller? Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Garino?
Yes.
Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so this public hearing is continued to the 21st. Mr. Romulus, we have additional board business that we have to conduct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
We have minutes from.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Okay, so if we just, so we have minutes to be approved, 8/19/20.
Yes.
Has everybody had a chance to look at them?
Yes.
Jean, what do you have for corrections?
I did send them to Les.
Okay. Do we have any concerns on the minutes? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to improve the minutes for 8/19/2020.
Do we have a second? After Mrs. Garino made the motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
By Mr. Geller. Any discussion? So Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
Mrs. Garino?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Geller?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. Do we have any board committee or liaison reports?
Not since the last.
Ms. Burke and Mr. Romulus?
No.
No.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn
So moved.
by Mr. McDonald. Do we have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Jemian. So Mr. Geller,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Garino,
Yes.
Mr. Jemian,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
All right.